Hi, friends. I'm Brooke McBride, the pastor at Bear Creek United Methodist Church in Woodinville, Washington. And as we enter Holy Week, I thought I would take some time each day to kind of explain what I see in each of these days as Jesus moves from Palm Sunday to the cross. And so the first day of Holy Week, we celebrated yesterday, Palm Sunday, and that's the procession and the hosannas and Jesus coming into the city riding a humble donkey. And there's a couple things I just want to share about this. Many scholars believe there were two parades that day. There was another parade on the other side of the city, the more popular side of the city. That was a parade of the Roman Empire. It was the soldiers coming in on chariots and marching in with their great big horses and all their armor, trying to put people in fear, trying to push them down and show them how much power they had and how much power the people didn't have. We're the ones in charge. You aren't. Fear us. But then Jesus comes in on the other side of town, probably the other side of the tracks, so to speak. And he comes in riding a humble donkey, trying to show all of us that God's power is not coercive, but instead a power that is down there with the people and is there to lift them up and encourage them and give them and empower them. And so Jesus walks in, comes into the city, riding a humble donkey, trying to tell us a different kind of power in this world. And then Monday, the second day of this journey, happens. We call it Holy Monday. And what does Jesus do? Boy, he has got guts. He marches into the temple. He walks into the temple and he sees this den of robbers. What is it? It's the money-changing system of the temple. It's the way people came clean in this society, had to refresh their relationship with God. And there was this exchange of money that had to happen. You had to buy things in order to be clean. And Jesus just hated this. And so he marches in to that place and he turns over the tables and he runs everybody out in anger. It's quite a scene. It's one of the first times we see Jesus just furious because of an injustice. What was going on? Well, Jesus saw these money changers as people who were preventing the common people, the regular people, from being able to access the love of God, to feel refreshed and renewed, to be able to get their sins forgiven. He didn't want this exchange, and he knew the church was just using it. The church of that day, the temple, was just using it to make money. And he just thought it was horrible. And so Jesus turns the tables upside down in fury. By the way, he's not the first one that wants to defend the poor. You can look back in scriptures, especially the great prophets, Prophet Amos particularly, just is fierce in his words and how we should be protecting the poor and lifting them up and giving them access and helping them with a hand up. And he gets furious at the people and at his nation when they don't do that. We also have some other examples in the Christian faith. Martin Luther, the humble German monk, at one point was so frustrated with the Catholic Church, his church, the only church at that point, and he was so frustrated by some of their practices that he put on the door of Wittenberg Chapel Church, this church in Germany, he put 95 theses, listed 95 things he thought the church was doing at that time to prevent people from finding the true loving God. And that started the Protestant Reformation. And it was quite a reformative group, changed the world. And then there's John Wesley, the founder of the United Methodist Church, or one of them. And One of my favorite stories of John Wesley is when he was a young priest, an Anglican priest. He was serving a pretty well-to-do little Anglican church in London. And at the door of this church, when he first came there was this policeman, and he had a billy club, and he was just whacking it like this, kind of intimidating everybody as they came into the church. And John Wesley came up to him and he said, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Oh, I'm trying to keep the riffraff out. There's just a lot of riffraff around here." And John Wesley, went in and he preached his sermon. And then the next Sunday, unbeknownst to the policeman, John Wesley somehow got a hold of his billy club and snuck it into the church. And at the beginning of worship, John Wesley took that billy club and he cracked it over the altar. And he said, "This will never be a church that keeps people out just because we think they're riffraff. This is a church of God, and this sanctuary is open to all people." I love that. We are a people who want to work fiercely in this world to help all people have access to clothing, to food, and to the good grace of God. Have a great Holy Monday.